Roswell Flight Test Crew, here today to flight test the Vusion House Racer from Hobbico. To keep up with the latest on drones, be sure to click subscribe. Now, we typically do our flight testing outdoors, but the company urged us to test the House Racer in its natural environment, the great indoors. Also, the weather here in Oregon has been so miserable this spring that flying outside just hasn't been an option for us. Now, to see the unboxing and setup for the House Racer, be sure to check out our previous video. We're going to do our testing in the lunchroom, but before we head over, a couple of basics. Always turn on the controller before you connect the battery to the aircraft. After powering up the aircraft, set it on a level surface for at least 10 seconds to give the gyros time to initialize. You need to arm the aircraft before the propeller starts spinning. Push the left stick down and to the right. To disarm, it's down and to the left. Notice these switches around the joysticks? These are the trim adjustments. Use these to counteract persistent aircraft drift. Push the trim switch in the opposite of the direction the aircraft is drifting to stabilize it. Before we go flying, Hobbico also sent us this collection of miniature gates and obstacles to test out. So let's get those set up first. Alright, so here we are in the lunchroom to flight test the House Racer. Now, this aircraft has 3 different flight modes, which are controlled with this switch. These range from a restricted flight mode, where only pitch and roll so far, to a completely unrestricted rate mode, where you could, if you wanted, flip it all the way over and back. So let's see how she performs. And I'm also curious to see how these prop guards and what they call these wall guards around the aircraft, how good a job those do in protecting it from bumps of things in the environment. Alright, so I'm in the most restricted flight mode now, and it's still quite responsive. I'm sort of wondering, frankly, about this fly it in a room sort of thing. I mean, it hovers quite nicely. It's remarkably sort of controlled for an aircraft with, no fancy stabilizers, no GPS, no collision avoidance of any kind, just an aircraft. It's really not bad. I've certainly flown a lot worse with the same basic configuration. But to be frank, I'm making small stick movements here, and I'm moving it around this room pretty effectively. I'm a little alarmed to think about what's going to happen when I make the controls even more aggressive. So now let's go ahead and test the wall guard. So I'm going to bump it into a wall here. Wow, look at that. Just bounces right off. That's pretty effective. Now I'm going to run it up to the ceiling and see if it protects us from ceiling collisions, which is also something you have to worry about indoors. Oh yeah! Look at that! Just perfect. This aircraft is pretty good for flying indoors with those wall guards in place. I'm sure you could find a way to knock it over, but it's remarkably resistant to bumps, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so now I'm going to try the second flight mode. This is the intermediate degree of stabilization. I'm a little nervous because, to tell you the truth, this thing already bounces around pretty readily, so let's see what happens here. And finally, I'm going to try out rate mode. I think this room is going to be a little too small, but let's see. Oh yeah. Yeah, you'd, not so much. They may call this thing the House Racer, but if you want to use rate mode, whoa, I'm going to call it the Gymnasium Racer. This thing could move amazingly quick in rate mode. This room isn't nearly big enough. Okay, so you see how the light has started blinking and you hear that beeping noise? That means the battery's running low. And that's actually a slick feature. A lot of these tiny little aircraft don't let you know when the battery's getting low. But this one, you definitely get a signal. Now when you see that, you've got less than a minute left to fly, so go ahead and get it on the ground. Okay, so here we are, the final test for the House Racer. Actual FPV flying through the obstacles they provided. I've switched it back down to the most restrictive rate mode, just so there's some chance I can keep this aircraft under control. And this will also give me a chance to show you the signal coming through the FPV goggles. So let's see how far I get. Alright, so the first thing you notice right away is that this is an extremely wide-angle lens, which makes sense for orienting yourself when you're flying like this. I am obviously no FPV racer. It is an awful lot of fun, and you can see where this would help you refine your skills and become sharper by having to make these small movements. I think the lunchroom here is just too small a space. It's a peppy little aircraft, even though it's designed for indoor flight. Oh, never mind. Now, here's our flight endurance test for the House Racer. So that was our flight testing of the Vusion House Racer from Hobbico. To keep up with the latest on drones, be sure to click subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Fly safe.
Hey, that's pretty cool, man.